Respecting maturity. Recall that social institutions train us in what to value, what to repress, and what to pretend, including what to presume, and then what to pretend is an accurate presumption. We are trained in how to relate to our experiences in regard to how we label sensations and organize them into perceptions. Experiences, sensations are organized and labeled, and we call these things perceptions. What portion of reality do we perceive? 20%, 80%? Even what's right in my midst, right here, in my visual field, I can't see behind me, right? Unless I look, through some mirror or whatever. But I have a limited range of visibility. And then no matter what I'm doing, I'm only aware of certain things. I know that there are a variety of objects around me, but the vast majority of the time, I'm completely oblivious to the vast majority of sensory data that's available to me. I can feel the chair underneath me. I can see all sorts of things, but I'm not giving attention to most of what I see. I can hear the sound of the computer humming. Of course, I can hear the sound of my own voice. Now, outside of this room, what portion of reality is outside of my direct immediate experience right here? Pretty much all of it, right? So what portion of reality do we perceive? Right now, I perceive a tiny fraction. I'm attentive and conscious of a tiny fraction. There's a box right over there. You see the box right over there? Now you can't see it, but there's a box right over there. Now, if I look at it, I can read the words on it, but normally I'm not actually focusing on the words. So there's all this variety that's available to me that I'm oblivious to. What portion of reality do we actually perceive? A tiny fraction. Even what portion do I sense that are, in the range of my visual organs and so forth, my visual perception? Tiny fraction. Of that, what portion do I perceive? Of all the stuff I sense? Potentially a rather small portion there as well. So with all of the sensations available to us, we filter out the vast majority of them and then focus on certain details as important, and then organize those important details into our experience. So there's what we are able to sense, what we perceive after all this filtering, or what we allow in and integrate and organize a variety of details and input and create a perception or experience. Put a series of perceptions together. We may call it experience, which we could think of as just a pattern of perception. An experience is a pattern of perception, an ongoing pattern that may persist. It may come and go. It will come and go, but it may persist for a while. So how does one shift from the experience of frustration to maturity? First, one must admit having had the experience of frustration. Plus, consider how it could be important to experience frustration. How could frustration be important? Without recognizing the importance of frustration, there would be no interest in learning from the process of frustration. In other words, without recognizing the potential of frustration being important, there'd be no interest in learning. We have to accept the possibility that we have to kind of have this curiosity in a sense that, wow, it may be worth exploring frustration, may be valuable, before we'd actually would do it, before we would really give our attention to it. It might be disturbing for someone at some point, but at some point, someone might get really curious about frustration, probably because they've experienced a fair amount of it and they're ready to learn from that experience. and mature through that ongoing or recurring experience of frustration. Only with distressed discontent of ongoing frustration is there a drive toward learning, toward maturity. Recognize the possibility of the importance of frustration. There would be a potential to move toward maturity. Without recognizing the importance of frustration, potentially, there'd be no discontent to drive us toward maturity. So maturity involves what? Being perceptive of frustration and of idealism, which is the source of all frustration. There's confusion and distress in the background. Maturity, as I'm presenting it, has to do with clarity about frustration. Even a welcoming of frustration, other people's and my own. Maturity involves being unafraid of frustration, being open to frustration, being courageous in the midst of frustration. Maturity involves being perceptive about frustration and idealism. The more precisely and quickly that I can identify frustration and idealism in others and also in myself, the more mature I am. So, a less mature person will take a long time to identify frustration and idealism and might not be very precise about it. A more mature person will quickly identify frustration and idealism and be very precise about what kind of frustration and what kind of idealism and how does it work and how is it escalated or how is it originated. They will be really perceptive. Perceptive. Maturity has to do with perceptiveness. And repeated exposure to other people's frustrations and my own frustrations is what leads to maturity. Is there any other way to get to maturity? Is there any other way to be clear about frustration and how it originates than to be exposed to it over and over in other people and in myself? I'm not aware of any other way to really develop in the realm of clarity about frustration except through the frequent experience or at least occasional experience of frustration. I witness it, I experience it, I witness it, I experience it. Eventually, I get clear and I mature. It takes some relaxing maybe before I will also really be able to quickly admit it without fear. Maybe I recognize it myself, but I don't admit it out loud, but at least I perceive it. I recognize it or admit it within myself when there's frustration present. That can be quite functional. That can be helpful when there is frustration present to notice that there's frustration present. What's the distance between me and inspiration? There's no distance. Frustration arises only because there's an underlying inspiration which has been frustrated. There's an underlying interest which has been frustrated. What has frustrated our inspiration? Inspiration. Well, idealism. That's what frustrates inspiration. The only thing that frustrates inspiration is idealism. It results in us pretending not to have an inspiration that we have, not to even notice it sometimes. Idealism about how we should be and how we should not be serve the function of repressing certain inspirations while encouraging others, and that's fine. We can respect idealism. We can respect that certain inspirations get encouraged at certain times and certain ones get repressed. And later, those inspirations may arise with great force and tremendous interruption and disruption. They may not be very well organized or very refined when they surface. So, I talked already about respecting social institutions, but let's talk a little more about it. Will there ever be a social institution that does not suppress certain inspirations and promote others? Will there ever be a social institution that does not program values to give people preferences of one over another, one thing over another, one set of things over another? Will there ever be a social institution that does not bias people and train them in what to respect, what to reject, what to pretend, what to presume, and so on? What if the sole purpose of social institutions was to influence or govern human experience? What if my attention has been influenced and will continue to be influenced? What if my behavior has been influenced and will continue to be influenced? And what if that's the purpose of social institutions? And I can respect them. That's what they're for. That's what they do. It's not that they should do something else. It's not that they should do it in a different way than they do it. They do it in a variety of ways. That's what they are. That's what they do. They influence society. Is this something to hide? That my behavior has been influenced? Or that my attention or perception has been influenced? That my patterns of interpreting reality have been influenced by social institutions? Should I hide that? Is this something to be ashamed of? Should I be ashamed of it? Is this something to pretend is impossible because it conflicts with the social ideal that I may have been worshiping in idolatry? Say that I've been worshiping a social ideal in idolatry as more important than all the rest of reality. And say that I have some experience or some observation that conflicts with that social ideal that I've been worshiping. Well, then I might pretend that my social ideal is accurate and pretend that reality shouldn't be how it is, and in fact isn't. It's not that way at all. My social ideal is like a blinder in that case. Embracing maturity. This is the final segment, so I'm going to go ahead and conclude with this one. Embracing maturity. Those who are open to frustration and grief, as in disappointment, guilt, sorrow, sadness, that whole realm of grief. Those who are open to frustration and grief have a remarkable opportunity. Because they're not terrified and ashamed of fear, frustration and grief, including disappointment, they have a unique perceptiveness and clarity and stability and sense of humor, and they're fun to be around, and they're mature, and they're open to other people's experience, other people's emotions, other people's perceptions, other people's perspectives. They might not value everyone else's perceptions or opinions or whatever, but they're open to them. Okay, now I know what yours are, so okay. Or now I have a sense of what yours are. I know at whatever level of detail I have a sense, and they move on. But they're open. And if they're incorrect, they're open to refining their presumptions or increasing the precision of their perceptions. They're relaxed, and it's a lot easier to be around those people because one can be relaxed around them, and one can be stressed around them and frustrated, and they are okay with that. That's pretty unusual. It's pretty distinctive. Could be interesting. There's a unique perceptiveness and clarity, and maybe value. Maybe someone might think, I would really appreciate being around one or more people who are really mature, who are really perceptive, who are really clear, who are really calm, really open, really respectful, and they respect all emotions, grief, frustration, anger, fear, whatever emotions I may have had, whatever experiences I may have. They're not afraid of other people's experiences. That's really unusual. I'm used to being afraid of other people's experiences most of my life, and I'm used to other people being afraid of my experiences most of my life. Wow, that's optional. There are people who are beginning to open their eyes as they live amongst a culture whose eyes are closed. So as we live amongst a culture whose eyes are closed, some of us are beginning to open our eyes, right? The advantage of these people opening their eyes over the masses may be enormous. They may perceive things sooner and much more precisely than the masses. They may accurately assess opportunity and accurately assess danger, rather than rejecting all perceptions of danger in a hysterical, paranoid, new age panic of anti-fear condemnation. Oh, that's too negative. For those people, it's too disturbing, so they say it's too negative. Okay, fine. And that could be a wonderful phase. I went through a phase like that to some extent, or at least I dabbled in a phase like that. I would say I went through a phase like that, where I wanted to be away from complaints. Other people's complaints were too much for me. I had enough complaints on my own to give, kind of attention to what my complaints were and what my concerns and my priorities and my values and my needs and my inspirations were. So I handled some of those things. And that meant withdrawing from some of my prior social relationships and dynamics and so on. I went into relative seclusion or reclusion, introspected more, relaxed from this hysterical, paranoid, new age panic of anti-fear condemnation, and I embraced balance, and you can too. Embrace balance. Rather than pretend that there's such a thing as a one-sided piece of paper. There isn't. There's a front and a back. There's contrasts, like negative electrical charge and positive electromagnetic charge. There's both kinds of charge. One is like a concentrating and one is like an expansive thing. There's both things. There's contrasts. Throughout life and reality, there are contrasts. There's frustration, there's gratitude and calm and maturity. And rage and tantrums and distress and fear and enthusiasm and grief and delight. So consider that there is no such thing as a one-sided piece of paper. In fact, these mature people reject the idea that there should be such a thing as a one-sided piece of paper. There isn't. There shouldn't be. And if we want to play around in language with a little playful statement like, oh, there should be such a thing as a one-sided piece of paper, okay, it's a joke. Fine. Further, these mature folks may value the contrary opinions of others. In other words, opinions of others that are unfamiliar to them or even contrary to their own opinion. At least occasionally, the mature may value the contrary opinions of others. They may value interaction with others who are also mature and respectful and insightful, perceptive, open-minded, and so on. They may seek out such interaction very intentionally, with great value and interest and inspiration, and divest from what is not working well in order to explore more attractive opportunities. They may seek out attractive interactions and divest from repulsive or unfulfilling, unsatisfying opportunities in order to explore more attractive opportunities. What is your interest in such conversations? If you've listened to, this must be over an hour now of audio and video, if you listen to all this, you must be interested in actually interacting with someone, whether it's me or other people. Maybe you already are, but why not interact more? Let me know if you're interested in some kind of interaction with me, which could be a phone call, video, teleconference where I have a group of people. You can be silent, but there will be interaction. If you're watching this, you probably know that I use Facebook and blog and YouTube videos and so on. And there's a lot more that you could look at. But you may want to do some kind of live, direct interaction with me or with a group that I'm in, or with some other group. What's your interest in such conversations? What frustrations are you willing to admit and release? What threatening idealisms are you willing to stop condemning? You know, the ones that threaten you the most. What if you just stop condemning them? Which ones are you most threatened by, that you condemn the most? Well, are you willing to stop condemning those? How about all of them? How about all the idealisms that are threatening and that you condemn? Are you willing to stop condemning all of them, if only for a moment? So you can pause, close your eyes, and relax. Imagine a little orange candle and a very quiet, calm room. Where you're just present to your own breathing, maybe the sensation of sitting in a chair, if you're sitting in a chair, some physical sensations. Maybe you notice different parts of your body relaxing. Then maybe you get frustrated and condemn some threatening idealism and throw a massive tantrum of frustration and distress and animosity and arguing and okay, well, that's that, okay. And then relax. Close your eyes, falling for a moment. Be calm, be mature, or pretend to be mature. It's a great way to eventually develop that skill. If maturity is a skill or a behavior, then pretend, get it wrong, be around other people who are at least pretending to be mature. And as time goes on, you may find the developing of maturity. For those of you who are interested in interacting with me further, I look forward to interacting with you. For the rest of you, thanks for taking the time to expose yourself to this content, and maybe a future time you will be interested in some of the other conversations that we could have.